Hello and good afternoon, ladybugs and yellow jackets. Welcome to this Friday's edition of Author Reads here on Fae Productions. I am your host, Fairy Princess Lolly, and today I am here with G Scott Huggins, who goes formally here as Scott. Um, Today's show, just before we get into all of the things, please, if you will, click the like and subscribe and ring the bell if you would like to get notifications about future episodes on our channel. And today's episode is sponsored by Henderson's Hearth. And Henderson's Hearth is a Louisiana Ren Fair favorite. That's where they began. And they are bringing you a traditional Celtic and Scottish recipes that are easy to prepare either at home or at fair. And they strive to provide healthy and delicious foods with ingredients that are either grown by them personally or acquired locally so as to ensure equality. Each product is made in small batches, and we actually have tried these ourselves and can vouch for the deliciousness of their food. So each product is made in small batches so they can ensure that the mix will in fact exceed your expectations, such as jams, soup, and bake mixes. They have roasted nuts and more. So please check them out at hendersonshearth.com. And right now, they have free shipping on all orders that are $25 or more. And if you sign up for their newsletter, you will get 10% off of your very first order. So if that is a thing that sounds delicious and good to you, wholesome, healthy food, then give hendersonshearth.com a try. And with that said, then I will introduce here today's author, who is Scott Huggins. Shall I just call you Scott? So your business being G Scott Huggins.
Yep, that's just fine.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and give a shout out to your home fair event convention. I think that's where I bumped into you, was on the Consolation Facebook group. So that implies you are definitely a convention goer to me.
All right. Well, yes, and Consolation is about the only place I can go at the moment. I was really hoping that I was going to get to go to LibertyCon out in Chattanooga this year, but it didn't work out. However, yes, I'm based in Racine, Wisconsin right now, although I grew up in Wichita, Kansas. So nice to see anybody from Wichita or Racine out there. And so thanks very much for tuning in.
Absolutely. And so for everybody watching here at home, just so you guys know, today we're just going to talk a little. Then Scott will read to us from one of his books, and then we will have our classic drawing at the end of the show. And so tell us a little bit about what you write, if you will. What is your genre? And I saw too recently that you had won an award, very like here in the last couple of weeks. So I'd love to hear about that.
Okay, well, I'll start with that. I was honored to win the Baen Fantasy Adventure Award. I actually won the second place on that the year it first came out, which was 2014, for a fantasy story called Phoenix for the Amateur Chef, which, like what I'll be reading today, is a fantasy comedy. But the story I just won with is more of a drama, and it is available on the Baen website right now, and it is called Human Slayer. And so I'm extremely honored to have been picked by Baen, which is a publisher I just really admire so much of what they put out. So that was a great honor. I write all sorts of genres. I have a sort of a middle grade to young adult science fiction book out on Amazon right now called Noon 2095, The Girl Who Wasn't There. But I have been published in a number of venues, for example, Escape Pod, Podcastle, Amazing Stories, with both science fiction and fantasy.
That sounds awesome. I have a huge collection of young adult because it's one of my favorite genres to read, which I suppose sounds kind of funny, but to me, sometimes the hardcore sci-fi is a little too much, and I always find that the young adult and kids actually in this genre, there's a lot more leeway for the magic works because the magic works, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so the girl who wasn't there is, I mean, essentially, it's kind of my attempt at a homage to an old Robert Heinlein Juvie, Kids on the Moon solve a mystery. So I like to think it was fun.
All right. Well, so tell us a little bit now, the book that you're going to be reading from today. Tell us a little bit about that. And it looks like you have it. Can we see it too? Will you show it to us?
Yeah. This is actually an early cover that I just happen to have. I mean, the new cover I think does look a little bit more awesome, and you guys have that on your tag. But this is what I happen to have with me at the moment. But the content inside is absolutely the same. So, All Things Huge and Hideous is the story of Dr. James DeGrand, who lives in a world where the evil Dark Lord has won. Orcs and trolls are the favored races, and humans and dwarves and the rest are relegated to the slums. And he is the veterinarian of the Dark Lord. Needless to say, he cannot quit. But his job is to make sure that the dragons and all the other horrible things that the Dark Lord keeps, as a matter of course, do not die. And if they do, then very, very bad things happen to James. Much worse than death.
This actually sounds like an awesome premise for a book. I kind of want to read that. Well, it's so funny because I always like it when the bad guy is, like the Dark Lord, right? And it's kind of a corny evil overlord aspect. I find that,
this is very much a corny evil overlord aspect. Yes.
and bad guys are always so interesting, right? The hero is always the good guy, but the bad guy is the one that has all of the struggles and the things that have made them into the bad guy, right? So it's fun to have that look into what's going on the maleficent side of things, if you will, right?
Yeah. Well, James is, shall we say, hardened. I feel like to think that at core he's a good guy who's just got to deal with a bad situation all day.
Oh man, that sounds it's very anti-hero kind of sounding.
A bit, yeah.
All right, well, I guess that we can go ahead and jump in here really quick to doing this. For those of you who are watching for the first time here at home, just so you know, while Scott is reading to us today from his book, I will be on mute, but in the chat with you guys. So if you have questions that you would like to ask him about his writing, please put them into the chat. I will be taking those questions down. And then after he's done reading, we will ask him the questions and have some conversation back and forth there about that. Always a good time. So, and also if you are looking to get any of these, like if you hear 3 words and want to buy it right now, that information is there going across the screen in the ticker. And of course, will be in the low bar as well. So I hope you guys enjoy. And Scott, I'm going to turn the screen over to you. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So let's do this. There you go.
All right. So the novel is a little episodic. I'm going to start with a chapter, an episode that is called "And in the Duodenum Bind Them." As I have previously noted, I am a big believer in the power of drinking to solve problems. No, not my drinking. That's just stupid. Even my mentor Arga should know that. It's other people's drinking that solves my problem. For example, 2 days ago, Jug the Goblin got drunk enough to think he could get away with burgling an Orc Lord's summer house. The Orc Lord's dire wolf ate Jug and broke off 2 of its teeth. Pulling the teeth for the Orc Lord solved my problem of paying the rent for my veterinary practice. Well, I didn't say it brought in repeat business. But sometimes I join people in drinking because we have the same problems. In this case, I was drinking with Olgash, Argash's son. Olga and I had grown up together, only he became a doctor and a self-made man, orc, and I inherited Argash's veterinary practice. Hard feelings? Why? Olgash and Argash both got what they wanted, namely for Olgash to rise to a higher level than fixing up animals. I, on the other hand, as a human slave, wasn't going to start my own business here in the Dread Empire, so we all got what we wanted. I grew up as a higher class of slave, and Argash got someone to keep the practice going. Even so, Olgash was saying, days like this, I want to take Dad's practice back from you. He drained half his beer. At least your patients don't decide they know better than you. That's right, I agreed. Their owners do it. I told you about the human vampire wannabe countess who kept her basilisk on a diet of blood, right? Yeah, but at least you can feel sorry for the basilisk. Olgash held his head in his hands. I'm treating a clan chief for impotence. Use the herbs, I said. The herbs work. And stop trying every day for the Dark One's sakes. Relax a bit. Did he listen? What did he do? I asked. Got someone else to look at it. Who? Medusa. I stopped in mid-pull from my beer. You don't mean he got her to look at it? Yep. He wanted it stiff. Well, it is now. I may have to cut it off before it gets infected. At least he can still pee or he'd be dead already. He just has to watch the range. I groaned. Then I told Olgash about the depetrification unguent because you really don't want to treat basilisks and cockatrices without a supply on hand, and sold him a jar at cost. He shook his head. Maybe too late already. Blood doesn't pump well through stone vessels, but he can damn well apply it himself. He thanked me and we went home. I hadn't been back in the office long enough to do more than check on the recovering patients when Harriet knocked at the door. I thought we didn't have any more appointments for at least an hour, I asked. I think you want to see this one. Then she giggled. Not a something's funny giggle, but the too weird kind. Harriet found something weird? This was a woman who had impersonated a dark elf for 3 years, tended bar for orcs, and crawled around in dragon guts beside me. Harriet didn't weird easily. I peered into the waiting room. There was a wizard and a dwarf standing there. Either of those would have been fairly unusual. What was almost unheard of was that they were the same person. His beard was long and yellow. His staff was carved with runes. Tellingly, the staff appeared to have started life as a pickaxe handle, and he wore long mystic robes rather than armor or mining gear. Beside him was a small wooden cage with an iron-grated door. I couldn't see what he'd been brought in. And how can I help you, sir? I asked. I need you to take a look at this, he said imperiously. The merest suggestion of uncertainty tinged his voice. So to speak. He raised the carrier. I looked inside. The interior was dark. I waited for my eyes to adjust. The interior was empty. I opened my mouth to ask what sort of joke this was, and that's when I heard the snoring. Very carefully, using my left hand, I reached into the cage. I touched a warm, furry surface for an instant before it jerked away. I felt the wind of snapping teeth on my hastily withdrawn hand. Okay, I said, so you have an invisible what in there? A weasel, the dwarf said, looking away. A weasel, I said. And what did you do to it? Invisibility spell gone wrong? The dwarf looked uncomfortable. What did you do to it? I repeated. It ate an item. I rolled my eyes. An item, I asked. If you tried, could you possibly be less specific? The dwarf looked puzzled. No. I sighed. Dwarves, too literal for anyone's good. I started over. So the weasel ate a magic item, and it turned the weasel invisible? Yes. Was this something edible, like a potion or a powder, or was this something that was not supposed to be eaten? It was not supposed to be eaten. Well, you're going to have to tell me what it was, or I don't have a prayer of getting it out for you. The dwarf finally said, a ring. A plain brass and silver ring. Brass, eh? Sure, because dwarves didn't think anyone else could recognize gold. Okay, I can give you a laxative, and in a few days. No, said the dwarf. And why not? I need it as soon as possible, and I can't take the risk of missing it. I sighed. Well, we can try an emetic. Despite my gentle hints that what followed was likely to be disgusting, the dwarf insisted on watching me induce vomiting. You haven't told me your name, Sir Dwarf, I said while we waited. That's right. Well, you have me at a disadvantage, and I don't work at a disadvantage. I could pay you to. I thought about this and then named a sum. The dwarf winced, but handed over a carefully counted out purse without a word, and that's when I began to get really worried because I'd been expecting a name. But just then, hacking sounds began to emanate from the cage. Sodden, half-digested food appeared from nothing and splattered on its floor. Eventually, wet, gleaming stomach fluids coated the bottom of the cage, but no ring. It's left the stomach, I said. The dwarf cursed, which sounded like he might join his pet in vomiting. You must operate, doctor. On what? I can't operate on something I can't see, especially when I have no idea where it is. I'd kill it. No! The dwarf opened and closed his fists. Finally, he said, Is there nothing you can do? I was told you were a good animal doctor. This isn't doctoring. This is like performing surgery on a ghost, oh dwarf who will not be named. I'm afraid I can't help you with this. I can pay you. It's not really going to matter how much you can pay me if I can't do anything. 10,000 gold, he said. I felt the floor sway under me. Bullshit, I said through the roaring in my ears. 10,000 in gold, he repeated. This time he was looking at me in the eyes. And how do I know, I said, forcing myself to remain calm, that you even have 10,000 in gold to your lack of a name? The dwarf unbuttoned his traveling cloak. It took a while because of the hidden buttons that had made the cloak look as if it had been casually draped over his shoulders. The cloak fell to the floor as if sucked down with a distinctive sound of falling chainmail. I picked it up. It took most of my strength. Through a frayed seam, I caught a glimpse of gold chain and sucked in a breath. My hand sprang open and I leapt back just in time to stop the falling cloak from crushing my toes. One moment, Sir Dwarf, I said. He nodded and I steered Harriet back into the operating room. James, you have gone white as a dark elf's hair. What's wrong? You need me to get rid of him? I don't think you can, I said, staring at the door. I'm not sure we can. What the hell was that cloak? I took a breath. What was the most valuable metal the dwarfs ever made? Mithril, if you believe that sort of thing, Harriet said. The incredibly light silver steel they made for the elves, supposed to turn swords and yet be light as a feathered down coat. Yes, I said, that's what everyone remembers, except the orcs who fought the dwarves directly. Incidentally, why is mithril spelled with a Y? Well, it's just that legendary, Harriet said. Really? Well, maybe, but according to the lore, spelling it with a Y was somehow necessary to allow it to exist in this world at all. And it is one of the basic laws of magic that the Y rune is one of the most powerful magical symbols. Really? Of course, Harriet half shrugged. Why do you think the Dark Lord's enemies before the war referred to themselves as the Council of the Wise? The Council of the... That's really how it was spelled? Yes, but I think we've gotten off the point. What is it the orcs remember? That the dwarves kept their best craft for themselves, as always. Argosh sometimes talked about it when he was drunk. It was a secret alloy of gold, and they simply called it armor. Completely impervious to magic and steel, extrememely heavy. Only their elite axe knights could bear it. Well, how'd the Dark Lord beat them then? Asked Harriet. Oh, at the last battle, he conjured a cloudburst that stayed right above the axe knights for hours. They all sank into the mud without striking a blow. That cloak is covering a sheet of armor, and it's worth more than 10,000 gold if I'm any judge. With that money, I could stock the clinic for a year and pay all the taxes besides. Or if the Dark Lord was in the right mood, freedom. Harriet's and mine. I fingered the jeweled slave collar around my neck. That gold could mean a future without slavery. We're going to do this. My brain snapped into action. Harriet, get me some paint. Paint? Just do it. Muttering, Harriet left. I returned to the back room. Sir Dwarf, I am engaged on your behalf. I began assembling my surgical tools. I really hoped that my very simple scheme was going to work, because if it did, then I was about to get that armor for practically nothing. I have your paint, and the faintest hope that you know what you're doing, said Harriet, limping in. I hoped I did too, but I just dipped a finger into the whitish paint and flicked it through the bars of the cage. It was so nice when things just worked for a change. Furry spots appeared, floating in midair. They snarled and retreated to the back of the cage. It took some time and a long-handled brush, fighting with an animal who did not especially want to be painted, but eventually the streaks of paint outlined an animal. And it wasn't a weasel. It was a cat. Why the hells did you tell me this was a weasel? I asked. I thought it was a weasel, cried the dwarf in not entirely convincing tones of outrage. After all, how was I to tell the difference? I couldn't see it. You got it in that cage, and you couldn't figure out that it was a cat? I lured it in with food, retorted the dwarf. It growled, ate, had fur, and tried to bite me when I approached. Typical human pet. Great. A cat. There's a cat in my clinic. I glanced at Harriet, who shrugged, looking wary. Cats were not common in the Dark Lord's realm, not as pets anyway. Orcs liked eating them, and hunting them was encouraged by the Dark Lord because they attacked the rats that he liked having around. Cats were somewhat magical themselves, but unlike, say, basilisks, had no predictable magical talents. This meant that I didn't see them very often, and when I did see them, as in now, so to speak, I wished I hadn't. Then my eyes narrowed. Something about that cat. Dumpling? I asked. The cat shape looked around at me and hissed casually. I sat down on the bench and drew my very special knife with an action that suggested I was trimming my nails. And what's more, I said, this isn't even your cat. This is one of my few feline patients, and he belongs to Borgo the Halfling. So why are you bringing him in? Ah, said the dwarf. Clearly, he hadn't expected this question. Well, as it happens, I was visiting Borgo when he fell ill, and he begged me to save this poor animal. That's it. But you said you didn't know it was a cat. In fact, that you did know it was a weasel, said Harriet. So even Borgo thinks his cat is a weasel? Yes, so it would seem, said the dwarf impatiently. And when I want your help, I'll ask for it, slave. I turned to him. Without looking away, I reached behind me and took the dragon scalpel down from the wall. I'm a slave. You have a problem with slaves? And what do you think those toys can do against a wizard? Said the dwarf. Cut him most of the way in half before he can finish a spell at this range. You want to see which one of us is right? Or do you want to swallow that pride before I remove it along with your esophagus? You're paying for my help. I think you need it. And I know that Borgo doesn't think his cat is a weasel. The dwarf looked down. Very well, he said. It is Borgo's cat. I told you it was a weasel because I know how he feels about cats. Now we're getting somewhere. So then, is this Borgo's item, or is it yours? And before you answer, let me just tell you, you're a bad liar. Is this ring his or yours? It is, in a way, both of ours. What the hell kind of ring could be both of... I trailed off. I looked at Harriet. She was blushing. The dwarf was blushing under his beard. Oh, for that kind of ring? A very unwanted image formed in my head. I wasn't even sure that the armored cloak was going to be worth it. Okay, it really was, but it was still disgusting. It took us almost half an hour to finish painting the cat, which is something I thought I'd never say, let alone do. Another hour to make sure the paint was dry, because you don't want paint in an operative wound. At the finish, we had one unhappy-looking cat, egg tempera paint making its first stand-up in spikes. I was just working up to telling Harriet that washing the cat was her job when I put down my razor and moaned. What's wrong, James? I hope I'm right, but I'm really afraid I hope I'm wrong, but I'm really afraid I'm right. No way to tell but opening him up and seeing. The paint made shaving the cat an exercise in frustration, but eventually I shaved down to the paint-covered skin. I looked to Harriet, who had the anesthetic drip going, and she nodded. I opened the skin with a firm slice and looked inside. There was nothing, just a dark, empty hollow. I sighed and affixed my head mirror, tapping the glowstone to activate it. Yep, in the bright greenish light, it looked as if there were a cat-shaped hollow on the table. I could see right from the wound all the way to the opposite paint-covered skin. And there, suspended in the middle of it, what looked for all the world like a plain silver and gold man's ring floating by itself. Why it was visible with the skin retracted and not through the skin, I have no idea. Magic is weird like that. Whatever the cause, the ring was going to be a problem because it looked to me like it was too large to pass naturally. There it is, cried the dwarf suddenly at my elbow. He reached for it. I grasped his wrist just in time and wrestled him back. No, I shouted, unless you've decided you do want that cat dead. All its internal organs are invisible. You can't just reach in and pluck it out. Well, then get it, snapped the dwarf, looking a little crazed. Back off, I snarled. Okay, this complicates things, but I knew my way around inside animals by feel. I picked up the scalpel and turned back at the same time I heard Harriet made a gagging noise and point, trembling at the cat. I whirled back to it. The wound was gone. It had closed all by itself. What the hells? I said aloud. I incised the skin again. This time I could see the lips of the wound draw together, healing. I calmed myself down before turning to the dwarf. Something else you want to tell me? I asked. The dwarf looked away. The ring is possessed of minor healing qualities. Minor? I said. I can't do surgery on that. It heals faster than I can cut. Well, now what do we do? The dwarf asked. We get you out of my operating room before you do something I can't stop, I said firmly. You're out, or you can take this cat elsewhere. I mean it. Grumbling, the mysterious dwarf withdrew. Okay, James, said Harriet. Now what do we do? We go see the frog family and borrow Nasher. Nasher was the basilisk I told Olgosh about. After the Countess's demise, I'd given him to a family of trolls. The basilisk's gaze couldn't hurt them or most of their neighbors, as they were all trolls and pretty much stone themselves. I, of course, wore mirrored goggles. What Nasher's gaze would do to me didn't bear thinking about. Mr. Frog heard me out, we negotiated a price, and I left with Nasher in the cage I had brought with me, having successfully, and for the only time in my life, rented a basilisk. Look, I know it was ridiculous. Therapeutic petrification, but I was desperate. I hadn't really thought the matter through, though. In theory, it was a neat solution. Prod grumpy, paint-covered cat awake. Turn basilisk cage to face cat. Remove basilisk cage. Extract now quite visible and no longer quick healing cat statue from cage, which turned out to be trickier than I thought because Dumpling was scared of the basilisk and had petrified his tail straight out. Some delicate maneuvering was needed to avoid turning Dumpling into a Manx. Finally, I had the cat out and clamped in a vise, belly toward me, amateur stone carving tools laid out in neat array. All I had to do was carve my way through solid stone to the ring, chip it out, reconstitute the stone chips in a quick solution of concrete, pour it back into the wound, and depetrify Dumpling. There wouldn't even really be a wound to heal. As long as it was clear what you were trying to do, the depetrification would restore an intact body. But where was the ring? Normally, I'd just incise the body wall, palpate the gut until I found the ring, and remove it. But now everything was solid stone! There were no organs to move and no way to feel my way to the target. The only way to get to it would be by blind chance, and the more I carved my way through the cat, the more likely I'd be to shatter Dumpling irreparably. And while I could certainly reconstitute the pieces into something, I couldn't guarantee at all that what I'd get back would be the same cat, or a cat at all. I lowered my tools and called in Harriet. She rolled her eyes. So you petrified that cat just to unpetrify it? Not entirely, I said to soothe my injured ego. I've made your job of washing the paint off the cat that much easier. Get to it. Harriet brightened at being relieved of the job of washing a living cat, who would have turned progressively invisible as she washed it. God damn it, how was I going to get this ring out? I couldn't see the ring inside a stone cat, and I couldn't cut the ring out while the cat healed. I needed the cat to be flesh and stone at the same time, and that was impossible. And that was when I remembered Olgash's story. I let myself in through the back of Olgash's practice. God damn it, James, you can't be in here. What will my patients think? Oh, come on, I said lightly. You know all that stuff about humans spreading plague is nonsense. It only ever started because the Dark Lord set you people loose on our cats. All those rats spread fleas. I know that, and you know that, but my patients don't know that. What do you want? How's your clan chief? I think he'll live, Olgash grumbled. Is that all you wanted? No, I need to talk to your Medusa. She's not my Medusa, he protested. And why? Are you having problems getting it stiff? Unfortunately for your low sort of amusement, I'm not that stupid. Unfortunately for my low sort of amusement, none of my enemies are. I need to talk to you, Olgash. What, you mean for advice? He said. He pinched the bridge of his huge nose. Must be some case. I shrugged off his resentment. Humans had a rep of being too clever for orcs. And orcs were generally kind of slow, it was true. Nevertheless, any human who wasn't an idiot himself knew that orcs were far from dumb. They just tended to solve problems with the minimum possible thought-to-force ratio. And I needed a second look at this. My first two ideas have been disasters. I laid out the particulars for him. So, I finished up, if what you told me about the partial petrification is true, I should be able to hire the Medusa to turn the cat partly to stone. I'll be able to see what I'm doing and still feel the ring. If I'm ready to depetrify it right away, the cat should survive. Olgash sighed. That's risky, James. You'll have minutes at best. And the more you petrify, the worse it'll be. I don't know why Medusa petrification works differently than basilisk petrification, but it does seem to. God's help you if she petrifies the diaphragm, the heart, or the lungs. Yeah, I know, I said, but what else can I do with this cat? Serve it on toast, Olgash replied. I'll buy it. It's been a while since the kids have had a good cat. Yeah, I don't sell my patients. Bad for business. I'm sure. Speaking of which, he jerked a thumb at the door. Out. I'll talk to Big Chief Rod of Stony Might and send word if I can set you up. I hadn't been back at the office for more than an hour when his message arrived. The Lady Ophidia would call on me next morning at my peril, which presumably means that she wasn't responsible if I was dumb enough to meet her gaze. By the time I kicked the dwarf who paid to remain unnamed out and treated the scratches Harriet had sustained restoring the stone cat, even though I certainly hadn't told her to try that without restraints in place, I really hoped this was the beginning of the end of my problems. I was, as always, wrong. Okay, well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's 20 minutes. I think I'm ready to take questions. I think that's a good stopping point in the story. So, unless you want me to read for significantly longer, let me know.
Well, I actually do want you. I was like, well, no, don't stop now. I'm really into this. So, and I'm not the only one here in the household listening, and so that was a great intro to this. The premise of your book is hilarious and awesome, and I love it so much. We do have some questions from the audience, so let me go find those. I feel like I'm sitting really low right now. Can I just adjust my chair really quick? I just keep looking at my head, and I'm like, how come I'm so low? Let's see. There we go. That's a little better. Okay. Here we go. I am going to go find these questions. And for those of you in the audience, if you have questions or anything you'd like to ask, please, you can just put those at any time into the comment bar. So, and I will be happy to pass them along. I have to scroll up here a little bit. Let's see. So our first question was from Gunther Hammerhands. And it is, what is the most difficult part of your writing process?
I think that for me, the most difficult part of the writing process is making sure that all the ideas, in fact, do fit together, so that I don't need something to happen, say, both before and after something else, because, I've written myself into situations, which is why I generally don't think of myself as a pantser, because if I try to pants write something longer than flash fiction, all of a sudden I realize, it's like, wow, I've just given myself a completely insoluble problem. This has to, event C has to happen, both before and after event D, so that does not work at all. And so that's why I really have to use an outline to make sure that all this makes sense before I waste a whole lot of time putting prose on a page that is going to lead to something stupid.
So you are of the variety of author that outlines the whole thing first and then does the writing, as opposed to has kind of the, what's the word I'm looking for, like the brainstormy. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to ask?
No, it does. Actually, what I will do is I will do the basic outline, the whole thing, and then every chapter, when I start writing it, it's like, okay, now we're doing the specific outline where I know everything that happens in the chapter. So, and that's really started to work very well for me.
So, okay. So thank you, Gunther, for that question. And the next question we have is from William Joseph Roberts. And it is, what is your favorite part of writing on the whole? And is it research, world creation, meeting the characters, something else?
Generally, I would say it's the world building aspect. Like, because, I mean, my day job is I'm a history teacher. So I love messing around. Okay, the religion is going to look like this, and the governments are going to look like this, and the history of this is that, and this is how the magic works. And although I will admit that I play pretty fast and loose with the magic here, but how come basilisk petrification is different than Medusa petrification? Because it just is, because it's magic. That's why.
That's why. Yep.
There you go.
Harkening back to the earlier conversation there with that.
Yeah, so world building is generally my favorite part. That's where I get to have the most fun.
So I'm curious, I want to say it was last week our author had worked with other authors in using their worlds and then writing stories within their worlds. Have you ever done that with other authors, or had other people use your worlds?
No and no. I'm just not really well known enough for that. Although I'd be up for it if the right world was around to play in. At one point, someone is like, well, I would like you to do this story in this world, but there's these big giant battle mech robots. But the problem is, I'm just not a huge fan of battle mech robots. So it's just like, that's cool, but it's just not my thing.
That makes sense. So let's see, we have one from Jack, which is, how do you develop and plot your characters? Which you touched on this actually a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in this case, I mean, the inspiration for all things huge and hideous was really twofold. I mean, first of all, my parents read to me and to each other the stories of James Herriot, the British veterinarian who wrote the book All Creatures Great and Small, All Things Bright and Beautiful, and it's the story of what it's like to be a country veterinarian, before World War II, and they were really wonderful stories. And then I married a veterinarian. And I really have to, I offered my wife co-author credit on this, which she didn't write any of it, but she is, it's
your resident expert.
Like, do lizards get fleas? What do you call the stuff that keeps the guts from not flopping around in your stories? Omentum. Like omentum.
I mean, that's a good question. Do lizards get fleas?
They do not. And in fact, that fact actually does show up in the book for reasons that are integral to the main plot. But in any case, or as close to the main plot as the book has. So, I started brainstorming on, okay, so what if you do have, I mean, I generally start with a plot with a what if. So, how do you do surgery on a dragon? I mean, you got to pretty much like figure out how to keep it still, cut it open, and crawl inside. And I mean, you're pretty much mining at that point for bad things. How if you have access to magic, I mean, for example, how do you tell if someone's brought you an undead patient? Do they even know that the patient is undead? Your patient is suffering from zombieism. So so in these stories especially, it's like it's all of what if. In my story that was the Phoenix for the amateur chef, the question is, how do you cook Phoenix? Because it burns to ash when you pluck it. So if somebody wants Phoenix, how do you deal with that fact? And generally the characters are generated by the fact that they're the poor jerks who have to solve these problems that I keep throwing them out, which is another reason you never want to meet your characters. Do you want to meet your characters? Oh, hell no. They would kill me so fast. So no, and especially not in a dark alley. It would be bad. Okay, so yeah, that's how it works for me, generally.
It sort of makes me want to see kind of an extended universe book where you actually have you've done like the medical journals of your veterinarian with sketches of the animals on their insides and all of the notes and tips and tricks. That would be so cool to see that, just like little sketches or something like the.
Now that I should collaborate with my wife on, because she's actually a better artist than I am.
Like a cryptozoological bestiary, if you will, or something to that effect, right?
Dr. James DeGrand template. There we go.
That would be pretty cool, actually. So I had a question, if I may, because I think, let me just make sure that is the last question. You did get a wonderful comment here from Anne Margaret Lewis, who said, Anne just asked a question, so let me pass that along here, which is, are you going to do sequels to this book, like James, I don't know how to say that last name, Harriet? Okay.
It's Harriet.
Okay, Harriet did, like all creatures freaky and ferocious.
I guess it depends what the demand on this book will be, but I certainly could.
Well, all creatures freaky and ferocious sounds like it might be a good sequel title, given our first chapter.
I'll admit it. Good suggestion, Anne.
They were getting into some freaky things. It was hilarious. Oh man. So this book, now the question that I was wanting to ask was, it kind of has less to do with this book in particular, but since this is the one that won the award, right?
No. Oh. What won the award was a short story.
Short story.
Yeah, there's a short story called Human Slayer, and it's up on the Baen website right now.
Okay. Oh, do you have I was going to ask you that earlier and I didn't. Do you know what that website is off the top of your head? I'll put it in the comments for everybody in case they want to.
Yes. It's www.baen.com. And to get directly to the story, you just have to say /Human Slayer.
Human Slayer. Okay. Oh, put that into the comments. And there we go. Because that is not. What? Oh, I think it's given me wonky messages. So that's okay. It got into some of the comments. I don't know. Okay. I guess maybe Facebook didn't like that I was sending a link. So. That's okay, though. I can add it also after the show to the low bar so that everybody can go there.
I'll put it in the private chat. There it is.
So the question, I spelled it wrong. It's B-A-E-N. I spelled it B-A-N-E. Okay.
Sorry.
Nope, that's okay. I will put that there again. Now, the question that I was wondering was, for authors who are in the indie industry, the independent industry, the indie industry. Okay. How does that, what are good ways to even find places to send your work to try to win said awards? How do you go about figuring out where you can even submit your work? Because I imagine that that is a great help for exposure for up and coming authors.
Oh boy, I honestly wish that I had a better answer for you, especially for book length manuscripts, because the story of All Things Huge and Hideous, it was published by a small press, which was called Superversive Press first. And unfortunately, Superversive did go out of business within a year of the publication of All Things Huge and Hideous. I like to think not because of it, but it did. So I am re-bringing this book out as, the rights reverted to me, and I'm bringing this book out as an independent title. And so this is the first time I've done this. And so there is a lot that I do not know. Now, what I can tell you is look for publishers and look for, there are several, like Baen, for example. Every year they run the Baen Fantasy Adventure Award. It is for a short story. They also run the Jim Baen Memorial Award, which is going to open, I think, in October and goes through February. And, so if you've got a science fiction short story, you can put that in. But I'm sorry, I can't tell you a whole lot about contest venues for book-length manuscripts.
So William here in the comments has said that generally the best way to find out about contests is word of mouth and fellow authors. And you're also suggesting along with that, if you find the publishers, that oftentimes if looking on publisher websites or something, they will have sections for where those contests take place.
If they have them, and if they are running the contests, yes, then they will certainly have that. But you want to be careful with any literary contest, because unfortunately there are people out there who, one of the warning signs is if it's pay to play, if there's an entry fee. General rule of thumb is money should flow toward the author, not away from. Now, if you're going indie, then you're not an author anymore. You're a publisher, and you're going to get the publicity you pay for. That's a different thing. But if it's a contest, unless it is very well known and recommended by literary names you trust, I would stay away from pay to play contests. The contests that have your best interest in mind are the ones that are offering to pay you.
That makes perfect sense, and that's really good too, especially right now with so many things being virtual and whatnot, and people who are new to don't know what to necessarily look for to recognize. That's really great advice. Thank you so much for putting that. So it is 2:52, so we're coming up on the end of the show, which means it is giveaway time.
Very good.
Yes, so for those of you out there, everybody who is a member of our Patreon gets an automatic entry into the drawing. And then if you put your name right now into the comments, then we will add you to the list. I'm going to allow for a few minutes for everybody to get their names in. And then we will put you onto the list, and we will spin the wheel live here. And can you please tell us what the prize is for today?
Okay, well, the prize is going to be a copy of All Things Huge and Hideous, and at your option, it can either be a paperback or it can be a Kindle edition. The Kindle edition, I will say this, if you really want it fast, the Kindle edition is going to arrive first.
Okay, and so, thank you, William. I've got your name. And so when is the book coming out again? One more time. I know that you've said it before, but
okay, it is on pre-order right now, so it can be pre-ordered on Amazon.com. It's All Things Huge and Hideous, James and Harriet Book 1, and if you let's see, so you can pre-order it now, but it will release on the Friday of Labor Day weekend, September 5th.
That sounds perfect. Okay, so with that said, let's see.
I'm sorry, Saturday of Labor Day weekend, September 5th, because I can't tell my days of the week.
Oh boy, at this point in time this year, I couldn't believe today was August 21st. And when I woke up, I was like, where has this whole year gone? For for everything being so crazy and all. Normally I lose track of time because the schedule is so packed, right? And you're just on the go and, you know, doing the things. And then this year, it's like it all just has become one big day, right? This sort of,
That is true.
it just kind of merged together. So, okay, so I think we have our names here, and I am going to now, there we go, pull up the wheel. Let me see here. All right. Here is the wheel.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's fun. I have to put in, this is just like a old list of names that pops up every time. So I need to come over here and put in everyone's name. Like this. You can see. So the wheel will pick 50 people off of this list because there are more than 50 people. So it just picks 50 at random and puts them onto this little wheel here. And pow! We push the spin button. Sarah Fields, congratulations, you are today's winner. So you will receive either an e-copy or a physical copy of, All Things Huge and Hideous. That is very exciting. Congratulations to you. And I will take this down here. And so is there anything else that you would like to say to everybody before we let you go this afternoon?
You know, I just want to say that I really appreciate everyone who has tuned in to listen to the reading. Really appreciate all my fans. Please drop by my website, which is gscotthuggins.com, the Logocentric Orbit. And because I'm going to be throwing out snippets there of every chapter up until the re-release. So there's a few more selections to read from earlier and later chapters of the book there. And hey, I just really appreciate you having me on the show on Fae Productions.
Yeah, no problem. And just as that one last bonus, I know that we do have a little surprise for you from you to our Patreon patrons. And what is that going to be? Without like spilling all of the beans, if you would.
Well, it's actually a flash fiction that I wrote for one of my patrons that didn't make it into the book, and it's a very short story called "The Hair of the Dogs," in which James and Harriet go up against a vampire bunny. So there you have it.
Okay, so I didn't actually know that. So you have a Patreon as well. So I will make sure that we give you the boost there when we post that to our patrons. That way, if they would like to go and support you there, they can also do that. So
that would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll get that information from you after the show. Well, there we are. So that brings us kind of to the end, and it's been great having you and wonderful read. So I look forward to seeing your book come out. Publishing, I always prefer to buy the things physically rather than ebook if I can at all, because I'm a bibliophile. I like to touch them. So thank you so much for being on the show, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. So.
And you as well.
All right. Have a good one, Scott. We'll talk to you soon.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Whoops, wrong one. Thank you for joining us here this afternoon. It's Friday. That means that Sunday coming up, we have Handmade Home Shopping, and you can tune in there if you would like to see an all-new selection. We have a full lineup of vendors, Ren Fair Convention, handmade vendors for you guys to shop with this week. So looking forward to that. And then it will be the mythical day off on Monday for me. So I hope to see you on Sunday, and have a good weekend, everybody. We'll see you next Friday as well. Bye-bye.